There are plenty of quintessential albums that every music fan should own, and it's safe to assume opinions as to what those are will differ depending on whom you ask. But if you grew up splitting time between your home stereo and the arcade, there's one album most would agree should be in your collection. We'll be discussing Buckner and Garcia and their most famous contribution, Pac-Man Fever, on this episode of TeeVee Games. In color. Video games during its early years was an industry that thrived on being formulaic. By the late 70s, you could walk into an arcade and play any game you wanted, so long as it was a space shooter, or some variation of Pong. Perhaps I'm exaggerating, but not all that much. By and large, space battles reigned supreme, represented by games like Taito's Space Invaders and Atari's Asteroids. And while incredibly tame by today's standards, many of them were seen as somewhat violent. As a result, arcade floors were quite the sausage fest. This would change by the end of 1980. Toru Iwatani, a young Namco employee with no formal training and only a few years' experience, envisioned a game about eating. The cute design and non-violent gameplay, he hoped, would attract more female players. No doubt you know the game we're talking about, Pac-Man. In May of 1980, Pac-Man hit Japanese arcade floors. While it performed admirably, it did little to dethrone the standard space-themed games like Space Invaders and Namco's own Galaxian. Nonetheless, Midway Manufacturing secured the rights to release the game here in the States. A quick name change to deny clever vandals a cheap laugh, and Pac-Man was born.
Video game fanatics, from kids to businessmen, are packing into the nation's arcades to play Pac-Man. It's the latest electronic toy. It's already more popular than Space Invaders or Missile Command.
America fell in love almost instantly. Pac-Man proved Iwatani's concept correct. The simple game with its jaunty jingle, eye-catching colors, and non-violent action brought new players and their quarters to the arcades, including women. Soon everyone knew exactly what that yellow circle minus a wedge was called. With 100,000 cabinets sold, altogether earning 4 billion quarters in just its first year, Pac-Man became more than just a game. It became a pop culture phenomenon. It didn't take long for the Pac-Man license to appear on anything and everything. Lunchboxes, clothing, board games, puzzles, color forms, books, coffee mugs, glassware, school supplies, TV trays, stickers, Coleco tabletops, plush toys, yo-yos, breakfast cereals, vitamins, whatever the hell this is, zipper decor, telephones, roller skates, even a Saturday morning cartoon. And courtesy of the songwriting team of Buckner and Garcia, a hit record. Hailing from Akron, Ohio, Jerry Buckner began his music career as part of a psychedelic rock band called Wild Butter. They released only one self-titled album in 1970, producing the single Roxana, Thank You for Getting Me High.
Thank you, Roxana, for getting me high.
The song earned the band some regional airplay but was otherwise unknown. Gary Garcia, meanwhile, was also part of the 1970s Akron rock scene, a distinction shared by Chrissie Hynde, The Waitresses, and Devo. Although Garcia was not credited on Wild Butter's eponymous release, he played with the band until their breakup a short time later. Soon afterwards, Buckner and Garcia turned their attention to songwriting. The duo relocated to Atlanta, Georgia, where they penned a few catchy commercial jingles, providing them with steady work. A song written in frustration gave them their first brush with fame. Gotta Hear the Beat, released under the name Animal Jack, generated some attention from radio stations. It was eventually purchased and released by Laurie Records in 1977. In 1980 came another novelty song and another pseudonym.
In the NFL.
Merry Christmas in the NFL, released under the name Willis, The Guard, and Vigorish, and pressed on Handshake Records, managed to hit number 82 on the Billboard charts. By 1981, Buckner and Garcia were doing quite well for themselves. They weren't household names, but they had steady songwriting gigs. And as fate would have it, they happened upon a Pac-Man cabinet while at a restaurant taking a break from their work. Having only heard of the game, they decided to give it a try since it was a thing everyone was doing at the time. That night, instead of working on music, they stayed at the restaurant and played Pac-Man for 2 straight hours. The time was not wasted though, considering it gave them their next great idea. Buckner and Garcia realized that a catchy song about the newest national obsession could serve as a catchy calling card to sell their services. This is why they went with the decision to forego the pseudonyms and instead release it under their own name. For the song, they incorporated actual sounds from the arcade machine, and since it was located in an active delicatessen, rumor has it that sounds of customers ordering sandwiches far in the background leaked into the mix. Though if that's true, I must not have a strong enough ear or a sharp enough stylus, because I cannot hear it. Pac-Man Fever, as the song came to be called, was shopped around to several record labels, all of whom rejected it. However, thanks to their morning disc jockey connection at Atlanta, Georgia's 94Q, Buckner and Garcia's song found an enthusiastic audience. Suddenly, the station was playing the song practically non-stop. Copies of the Pac-Man Fever 45 were pressed and released on the BGO label, selling out almost immediately. News of the song's success caught the attention of CBS Records, who wasted no time granting Buckner and Garcia's song a wide release. The Pac-Man Fever single on CBS's Columbia label here in the States was released in December of 1981 in various formats: 7-inch, 12-inch, even a square picture disc. With the single's strong performance right out of the gate, CBS Records insisted on a full album. Buckner and Garcia were a couple of musicians that perhaps dabbled in the novelty song business and also happened to enjoy Pac-Man at the height of its popularity. The duo had hoped that the album CBS wanted would allow them to showcase their wide assortment of serious songs that they have amassed since they began playing and writing since the 1970s. CBS nixed that idea right quick. They wanted more songs about video games, especially since Pac-Man's success led to a slew of imaginative new cabinets pulling in mountains of quarters. Even though they feared being pigeonholed into one genre, rightfully so, Buckner and Garcia reluctantly complied. Over the next 10 days, the songwriters churned out 7 more songs about popular video games, such as Frogger, Defender, Berzerk, and the arcade's newest sensation, Donkey Kong. The album, also entitled Pac-Man Fever, was released in January of 1982 on vinyl, cassette, and 8-track. The title track single continued selling quite well, hitting number 9 on the Billboard Top 100 by March, and eventually selling 1.2 million copies by the end of the year.
I don't know where these two fellas came up with the idea or why or what, but it's a smash. And Gary and Jerry have done very well by this. Ladies and gentlemen, Buckner and Garcia.
Its success earned Buckner and Garcia a spot on both American Bandstand and Solid Gold. A second single from the album, Do the Donkey Kong, was also released in 1982, but just missed the Billboard Top 100, peaking at 103. Nonetheless, the Pac-Man Fever album eventually earned gold certification from the RIAA. Let me shut up for once and play some quick samples of the other 7 songs.
Go, Froggy, go.
You gotta keep on hopping till you get to the top.
Go, Froggy, go.
Gotta keep on hopping, you can never stop. Go Froggy, go.
Oh, Centipede, you can't run away. You can't run away. Come on, come on, come on, come on, do the Donkey Kong. Do the Donkey Kong. Come on, come on, come on, come on, do the Donkey Kong. Hyperspace, push on the button and I'm back in the race. Hyperspace, shooting my rockets all over the place. I'm invisible now, but I'll be back again. I'm the defender. I'm new defender. I'm the defender. A mind bender. I'm caught in a mouse trap. Now what will I do? My mouse trap, mouse trap. What can I do? I think I'm going berserk. I think I'm losing my mind. I'm getting lost in the shuffle. It happens every time.
What's quite unique about the album, at least the vinyl version, is that it doubles as a mini strategy guide. The inner sleeve contains some patterns players could use to go further in game and improve their scores. And since having a high Pac-Man score was an accomplishment you could put on a college application back in the early 80s, it was a welcome bonus. After Pac-Man Fever, Jerry Buckner and Gary Garcia were ready to move on from video games. Inspired after watching a movie about a lovable alien, the duo recorded E.T. I Love You in 1982. Their manager brought it not only to CBS Records, but Steven Spielberg himself. The feedback they received was overwhelmingly positive. The song was set to see a wide release with Spielberg's blessing. Unfortunately, Neil Diamond got in the way. Neil, also moved by E.T.'s big screen antics, recorded Heartlight. Since he was also a CBS artist, the label made the decision to promote Diamond's song over Buckner and Garcia's, even though they had to pay a $25,000 settlement to Universal Studios for Diamond's unauthorized use of the film's ideas in his song. E.T. I Love You was shelved for almost 6 months, long after the movie's hype had died down. While seeing some airplay, CBS themselves offered no promotion as they only put it out to avoid a lawsuit. The original single never saw a release on any album. CBS dropped Buckner and Garcia the following year. By the late 90s, a lot of casual music fans had long since tossed their turntables and cassette decks aside for digital recordings, either via compact disc or soon-to-be devastating MP3s. But those who wanted to enjoy Pac-Man Fever in modern formats were left hanging, as the album never saw an official CD release. Sony Music, having purchased CBS Records in 1987, refused to release it. Facing no other solution, Buckner and Garcia chose to completely re-record the album. The official, but not original, CD version of Pac-Man Fever was released in 1999. While purists might be disappointed, the duo did manage to capture the original as closely as possible. The song that suffered the most was Mousetrap, as they had no access to a working machine and had to settle on real dog and cat sound effects to replace the originals. It was too bad they didn't have access to MAME. Mousetrap was working in the emulator by then. The CD version of Pac-Man Fever was soon followed up by an MP3-only album entitled Now and Then. And while E.T. I Love You is included, it is once again a new recording as opposed to the Sony-owned original. The duo continued working through the 2000s while also embracing the respect and appreciation showered upon them from the retro gaming community. On September 9, 2011, they released Found Me the Bomb as a free MP3 for the gaming website Giant Bomb.
Found me the bomb. I'm talking about that giant bomb.
This would be their last release together. Gary Garcia passed away on November 17, 2011 at the age of 63. In 2012, Jerry Buckner recruited many of the surviving band members from the original Pac-Man Fever sessions to record a track for Disney's Wreck-It Ralph. The track, entitled Wreck-It, Wreck-It Ralph, maintains the style and enthusiasm of Pac-Man Fever. And in honor of his departed friend and partner, the track was still credited to Buckner and Garcia. Pac-Man Fever, the song, still remains iconic in retro gaming circles. In 2012, Monolith Productions founder and internet personality Jace Hall recorded a hip-hop reimagining of the track for his self-titled web series. In 2015, elements of Jace's track, along with Gary Garcia's original vocals, were reincorporated into a modern recording of Pac-Man Fever, this time titled Pac-Man Fever Eat 'em Up, to coincide with the release of the film Pixels. There is actually quite a bit of great material courtesy of Jerry Buckner and the late Gary Garcia. So much so that Jerry compiled much of it on PacManFeverVault.com. While it does cost a one-time fee of $4.99, it does give listeners access to 2 versions of the Pac-Man Fever album, as well as Now and Then, older songs like Christmas in the NFL you will not find anywhere else, and other rare and unreleased goodies. What you won't find on PacManFeverVault.com, sadly, are the original early 80s Columbia/CBS recordings of Pac-Man Fever or E.T. I Love You. For that, you will need to bust out your turntable or tape deck and hit those used record bins. You may have trouble finding E.T., but you'll come across Pac-Man Fever quite easily. This was Dave for TeeVee Games. Hope to see you next time.
Pac-Man fever.